Hasn't been much progress on the Austin for a little while. I've been distracted by other things. So the MGB needed a new battery. I was sorting that out today. I might talk about that a little bit later. And I've been doing some other little bits and pieces. This is my little lathe, and one thing that's always bugged me about it since I got it is the tailstock as they come originally doesn't have any sort of lock on it. Basically it just has, there's a plate underneath here with a bolt on it, and there was a nut. And so every time you wanted to lock the tailstock, you had to tighten up that nut. So find the spanner, tighten the nut up, loosen it, shift it again. That's just a real pain. So a very common modification on little lathes like this, and especially the Chinese mini lathes, is to make a cam lock. And that's what I did here. I won't go into it too much. There's plenty of information online about how to do it. I'd previously done it already on my first lathe, so I knew what I was doing. The only difference is on this one is instead of having the bolt come directly through into this little thimble for the eccentric shaft to act on, there's actually an inner sleeve inside there that's threaded in the bottom, and the bolt screws into that threaded piece inside there, and it's that the eccentric works on. And that just gave me a lot more adjustment, because I could adjust the position of the bolt in the bottom to give me the vertical clearance I needed. The other small change I made is this is fitted with a spring in here. That does two things. One, it keeps this cross shaft in the right position. It's pulled tight into the correct position the whole time. And the other thing is it means that the handle is always under tension, so it doesn't just flop around, which my old one did. On the original one I made on my other lathe, I actually had a pin in here, and the handle would just sort of flop down against it. Whereas this one just stays where you put it. So you can just slide it, lock it in place, slide it back. That works really well. Another good bit of progress is on the clutch for the Riley. So this was my original sliding plate, but this isn't the correct one. And luckily, one of my contacts in the club was able to find me a good second-hand one that is correct, and also make up a new nut for me, which is what bolts all this together. So this and this look almost identical, and the only difference is this one is actually about 1/4 of an inch taller. But obviously that's completely essential for it to all fit together correctly. So this is the sliding plate. Obviously that's the flywheel down there, and this is the driven plate that goes onto the spline on the front of the gearbox. So this fits in here, and underneath the tape there are actually little ball races that slide in these little bush things. There are clutch springs that go inside there. I have all of those new, and then these get bolted together. And obviously the springs push all this together, which is what locks everything tight together. To release the clutch, there's this special cup, and that goes on there, and there's a bearing that fits in here. Very expensive bearing, but I've got one of those, a new one of those. And then the nut goes on top to keep it all together. So what happens is when you put your foot on the clutch pedal, inside the bell housing of the gearbox, there are two little arms that engage into here. And as you push on the clutch, that pulls this up. And that pulls on the bearing against the nut, and it lifts that whole sliding plate up. And that's what disengages the clutch. So now that I have all the correct parts for the clutch here, I can look at getting all the engine rotating parts balanced. So that's quite a big step and good progress as well. So the other really exciting thing that happened recently is my first shipment of a lot of the really special parts I need to do this Brooklands replica arrived from the UK. That's what this box is here. Now, I'm not going to do an unboxing because, to be honest, I'd already done it. I was too excited when it arrived and just ripped into it straight away. So you don't get to see it all being unwrapped. But what we have here is a small amount of parts, but quite an expensive lot of parts. That's one of the things with these old cars, especially vintage cars or pre-war cars. They're not exactly cheap. The Austin 7 there isn't too bad. They were very common cars. They're quite small. There's an awful lot of parts around, an awful lot of knowledge, and a lot of the parts are being remade and you can buy them new. So it's not too bad. I mean, it's not cheap, but it's not ridiculously expensive. Something like the Riley here is a little bit different because I'm building a replica of an actual car, an actual sort of race car from the period. So to do it properly, you have to use the right parts. My Austin 7 there, the good thing about building a car like that is if you build a special, you basically get to build what you want, and you build it how you want to build it, and you use the parts that you want to use. So it doesn't need to exactly replicate anything. It all has to be period correct, so it has to be a car from the 30s, which is what I've done. And that's also important in New Zealand for getting the car registered onto the road. There's a special class that we can get them registered under, which is, I think it's authentic reproduction vehicles, something like that. Basically, it means if you've built the car using the parts and materials off the day in the way that they were built, you can get it registered as if it was an original car. So with the Riley, I'm actually building a replica of something that was very specific. And if I want to do it properly, I have to try to do it as closely as possible to one of the originals. Now, some things I'm not going to get exactly right. So the Riley Brooklands, for example, had special springs with special castings, and you just can't get them. They just don't exist. So I'm going to use normal Riley springs. So that's close enough. But then some of the other parts, to do it properly, you just have to pay for the right parts. So some of those are what I've got here. This, for example, is a Brooklands pattern sump, engine sump. And this is actually a magnesium casting. So it's quite light, but it's very nice. And that is, for a Brooklands, that is the correct sump. Some of the other parts here are rear suspension spring shackles. These are the front shackles. These are Brooklands pattern clutch and brake pedals. These ones are front shock mounts. These are one of the special castings that you need if you're building a Brooklands. So these are bolt onto the chassis down here somewhere, and this is what the radiator bolts onto. Something else bolts onto here, but I can't remember what off the top of my head at the moment. Some of the parts are second-hand. These are the ends for the track rod, which is here, and for the drag link as well. I don't actually have the drag link here yet. I do have one, but it's it's over in the UK at the moment, and that'll be coming in the next shipment of parts, which will also include the remote gear shifter, the proper Brooklands pattern gear shift that goes on top of the gearbox. So these are second-hand, but these will all clean up fine. And the single most important part was this. And this is the part that's been holding me up for the longest time with building this car. So this is the offside engine mount, suspension mount, and steering mount bracket. So this is a casting, and that fits down inside there. And you can see how the steering box mounts into that bracket. I had made a mock-up. I 3D printed a rough version based entirely of photographs people had sent me and knowing more or less where things needed to go. And it turns out I wasn't too far off. It's about half an inch out. But now that I have the proper one, I can drill the chassis and mount those. This was the matching one that goes on the near side of the car. So one thing I will have to do is buy the proper high tensile bolts to bolt all this onto the car. Originally these would have been riveted, I believe, but I can bolt them on with high tensile bolts. But I'll have to get the correct BSF nuts and bolts for it. So that's another area where these cars get expensive. So being a 1930s car, most of the hardware on it would have been British Standard Whitworth or British Standard Fine nuts and bolts, which is what these are. And those are getting rare, and they're getting very expensive. So I'm going to have to order those from the UK, which means they're not going to be cheap. Plus I have to pay for shipping, plus I have to pay for tax, all that kind of stuff. But it's the only way to do it properly. I mean, you could theoretically assemble it all with metric nuts and bolts, or UNF and UNC, but then it won't be correct. It wouldn't be period correct. So it's just one of those places where to do it properly, you just have to spend the money to do it. So now that I've got that, I think this can really start progressing. The other thing is, you might notice the front axle isn't here. I decided the best way to fix that was to get it sleeved, which is probably the correct way to do it. Unfortunately, I can't do that here myself. My little mill there isn't really up to it, and I don't have the skills or experience to be able to do that correctly. So that's been taken off to the engineering guy who's been doing the work for me. He is going to set that up on his mill, which has a tilting head, because you need to bolt the axle down very firmly, of course, and then you have to take into account the kingpin inclination angles, and nothing straight. So it's quite a bit of fiddly setup to get it all correct. And then the hole gets bored out slightly oversized, and then a sleeve made from medium tensile steel gets pushed into the axle, and then that gets reamed out to fit the kingpin perfectly. So he's going to do all that for me, which will be good. I think that's about it for now. So hopefully now things can start progressing a little bit quicker. Like I say, I'm going to have to make more orders to the UK. I still need to buy all the shock absorbers and shock absorber mounts, nuts and bolts. I am going to have to look at getting these springs adjusted. There is someone locally who can do that, though, luckily. These front ones may not be too bad, but I think they're probably a little bit too arched, and I need to get them flattened slightly. The rears, I'm also going to have to get redone. These are Riley 9 springs, but it's maybe a bit hard to see. But the top leaves on these are actually different. So I need to figure out exactly which is the correct one, and then I'll have to get a new top leaf made, probably to replace the bad one. But that's all doable, and that's actually not too expensive. I will have to get these all shipped up to Rotorua, which is going to cost a little bit, but that's not going to be too bad. The other thing I need to start doing is looking at the rear axle. I do have buried under there rear half shafts, but I don't really want to use those. One of them looks like it's been broken, and it's actually been welded into the hub. Those are available new. Again, they're not cheap, but if I want to do it properly, I might as well get the new ones and then never have to worry about them again. So the aim is to start at the front and sort of slowly work back. So get the suspension sorted out, the steering sorted out, start building up the lower half of the engine, get that bolted to the gearbox. The gearbox is under there, that's all ready to go. I do need to make the rear gearbox mount still, but we're getting there. We're starting to make progress. So another thing that can be expensive with old cars is even my MGB here, which is a classic car technically. It's not vintage. It's a car that I use once a week, but I could go weeks without using it. So one of the things I like to have in a car like this is a really good battery. And I also have it hooked up to a little trickle charger that's up there. So usually what I do is I plug it in via this when I'm not using the car, and it keeps the battery topped up. So the original battery in that was this one. And I had to go look up my records. And I bought this in 2006. So it's lasted very well. The battery still works okay in the car, but it's just got to the point where it's really struggling to crank the engine, especially on cold days. Like this morning, it was quite cold, and it only just turned it over. And when I test it with my little battery tester here, I don't know if we can read it, but it's basically saying it needs to be replaced. So I had to go out this morning and buy a new battery. And I sort of looked into it a little bit to try and figure out what a good battery would be. A lot of the modern car batteries are calcium based, and I'm not sure that they'll work very well in a car like the MGB because it's got an old fashioned alternator charging system, and I don't think it can charge the batteries the way they really need to be looked after. So I went for this Optima red battery. These things aren't cheap, but apparently they're really good. And also they like being hooked up to a trickle charger. So these batteries will apparently keep their charge really well if you've got them hooked up to a little charger all the time. So it was expensive, but it's probably worth it. And if I could get another 15 odd years use out of it, then I think it's money well spent. So I'm going to put this back in the car now. Hopefully it'll fit. I did measure it, and we measured it at the battery place, and it should drop into the little hole.